Jake Hamilton.
My man.
Who is joining us. Man, this is a fascinating interview you have this
Thank
week.
Thank you.
James Cameron,
cool.
run us through why you were talking with James Cameron, why you got the Chicago exclusive.
Yeah,
here.
you know, he only did a handful of interviews. We're the only TV station in the country that he spoke with,
What?
which was a big
What?
honor. Yeah, the only local TV station.
Is it because you have his phone number and you texted him?
Here's what I'll tell you. I first interviewed James Cameron when I was 19 or 20 years old, a while back. I'm 37 now, so it's been I've been able.
years ago?
One time
Decades.
I interviewed James Cameron once at 2 o'clock in the morning in London because I had to sit around and wait for him to ascend from the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and be flown. I got to there and they said, "Well, you're going to have to wait because he's coming up. He's coming up." I don't think he was going down to the Titanic. I think he was down there doing something else.
Okay.
But he was. I mean, that's just what he does. He just goes down. But he had to ascend from the bottom of the Atlantic and then be flown to London and then sat down with me at like 2 o'clock in the morning. Yeah, just sat there and waited for him. Yeah, actually, I think Natalie Bomke, I think, has a signed book from that interview because I was like, because Natalie's a huge Titanic fan. But the reason that I spoke with James Cameron is there's this new book coming out that just came out today called Ghosts of Hiroshima. And it's coming out this week because this week marks 80 years since the dropping of the bomb at Hiroshima and then just 3 days later at Nagasaki. And this book tells the story from the perspective of those who were on the ground, real life stories of people who experienced and survived the bombing, and in 160 cases survived both, because there are about 160 accounts of people who survived Hiroshima and then for one reason or another got on a train, went to Nagasaki, and then were there 3 days later when the second bomb dropped. So after Avatar 3 opens in theaters later this year, James Cameron is going to set his sights on adapting this novel into his next movie. And there might be people who say, well, this is the guy who made Aliens, and he made The Terminator, and he made Titanic and Avatar. What does this guy know about adapting, such a serious topic like this? But, Anthony and I, you and I were talking about this. If you go back to his earliest films, The Terminator, T2, a huge plot point in those movies is nuclear war and the impact that nuclear war has on our society. So whenever I spoke with James, I brought up the fact that the very first scene of his I ever saw as a kid was the recreation of the remnants of a nuclear war, and really it's been a theme of his work for almost 40 years. I gotta tell you, my first introduction to your films was my parents taking me to see Terminator 2 Judgment Day in theaters, which means the first scene of yours I ever watched, if you think about it, was a world ravaged by a nuclear bomb. And here we are, we're 35 years later, you're gearing up to tackle the subject again in a very different way. But I'd love to know, what is the difference between the filmmaker who told the story of the power of nuclear power 35 years ago in a fictional sense versus the filmmaker who's gearing up to tell the history of Hiroshima today?
Look, I've been thinking about this theme for a long time, since I was a kid. I was expressing that. I was, having kind of a cathartic reaction to that when I was making The Terminator, and then obviously with Terminator 2, when Sarah's at the chain link fence and she gets incinerated and then blasted by the shockwave. I wanted to make it quite visceral for people. How am I different now? I don't know. I only hope that I know enough or have learned enough as a filmmaker to be able to do this subject justice. I certainly I know how to do the visual effects and all that. That's not really the issue. The issue is how to tell this as a human story and yet be truthful to what happened, to the horrific aspect of it, It'll be challenging to both be honest and authentic about what it was like, because to me that's the point of this. What was it like to witness a nuclear weapon? I want it to be visceral. I want it to be powerful. At the same time, how do I achieve some kind of poetic or spiritual level to it?
It takes longer.
That kind of rises above that in terms of storytelling. I don't know. It's
fascinating.
So, it's really an interesting perspective when you think about how long this is a topic that has fascinated him, and you sort of look at, how the themes have been buried in some of his past films. Now, I mentioned that this movie is going to happen after Avatar 3 comes out later this year. And when it hits theaters, however many years from now, it will be his first non-Avatar movie in about 30 years, which is pretty insane because he's been doing Avatar for almost 3 decades, which is because that's how long it took to get the technology to that point, and then there was like a 15-year gap between Avatar 1 and Avatar 2. So
that's right.
It took a while, and if you think back, the last film he made before the most recent, before Avatar 1, I guess, was also a big screen recreation of a moment in history, of course, 1997's Titanic, which not just became the highest grossing film of all time, it also won, it has the record tied for most Academy Award wins with 11, which is, pretty remarkable. And you guys know I love creating these segments called The Moments That Made Us, where I talk with the people who are a part of, in some form or fashion, just those moments in movie history when you watch them and you go, God, I remember where I was, what theater I was when I saw that. So having the chance to talk with James Cameron, I wanted to talk to him about one of the most iconic moments of his career, because there's plenty to choose from, but this one specifically from the movie Titanic.
They said you might be up to it. Give me your hand.
And I look back at the most iconic movie moments of all time with the people that gave them to us. And God knows, with you, there are dozens that I could choose from. But if you don't mind, sir, because I've never asked you about it, would you mind if I asked you about the I'm flying scene from Titanic?
Flying! Jack.
Okay, so two things. One, it was completely spontaneous and a moment of capture of every element coming together. The sunset, that was all natural. There's no digital effects there, right? It just happened right in front of the lens. And it was a fragile moment. It only lasted for a few seconds. But the reason we got it was meticulous planning. We were in rehearsal. We had rehearsal all in advance. I had like a little mock-up of the bow. I had just like a piece of railing, and I worked with Kate and Leo. And I said, look, if we're going to do this at sunset, we're going to have seconds. So let's work this out. And we talked about how the kiss would work, how the choreography of she's flying and they wrap their fingers together, and then she kind of pulls him in to this embrace, and then she turns into the kiss, and they meet in the kiss in that kind of strange but really kind of romantic position. And I even drew with a Sharpie lips on my 2 hands, and I told them how I wanted them to like wait and hesitate and then smoosh and all that. It was meticulously planned like a space mission. And when we actually went to shoot it, we had, I want to say, like 2 minutes.
Oh.
We did 2 takes. Maybe we had 5 minutes. We had 2. The lighting guys were running around. They were dropping filters in and turning.
We were just talking about sort of the CGI recreation. And some shots, they built just the bow, so whenever they're at the front doing that, in the huge wide shots, it would be obviously the CGI, but then there were massive chunks of the Titanic that was recreated for the purpose of them. They kind of filmed off the coast of Mexico, I believe, in the Pacific Ocean, and would just kind of set the ship into the water so that they would have the stunt people sliding down the deck. It was so there was to really kind of in a lot of cases, if James Cameron can do something what they call in camera, which is not in post-production with CGI, if he can actually do it in front of the camera, he does.
But he's not afraid to shy away from CGI.
Exactly right, which I was surprised to hear him tell me that if he were to make aliens today, he would make them using CGI, which I'm not sure I agree with, because I love Stan Winston's animatronics, but
the sunset in the background.
Sunset
so I guess the
was
bow
real. Yeah,
was
sunset.
Outside
Exactly
then?
right. Yeah.
And so
a lot
they
of
were outside and they ran up and did it, and then you said the water was.
The water was CGI. Yeah.
So
interesting.
Awesome.
One question for you about. Okay, so this is. Titanic was a movie where they took an historical event and kind of made fiction within it.
There was no Jack and Rose.
Exactly. In real life, there wasn't a Jack and Rose. For this Hiroshima project, do you expect him to take kind of a similar track? Because this book, you said, is full of true stories, but it's still a novel.
Amazing true stories, and it's a collection of stories. So what he told me was the big difference between how he made Titanic and how he's going to make Ghosts of Hiroshima is that he doesn't have to create a Jack and Rose. He doesn't have to. He said the stories that are in, and there are a lot of them, and so I'm sure he's going to pick some and not others. There is a story of a man who, after the bomb was dropped over Hiroshima, he went to look for his wife, and all he could find were her bones.
Oh,
and so he put her bones in a bowl and said, "I'm going to take these bones to her parents, and they live in Nagasaki." And he got on a train and with her bones to go back to Nagasaki, and was there for both bombings. And so basically, what he told me was, I don't have to create a Jack and Rose. Like the stories, and that's just one of dozens of examples of that's sort of in this book. And basically saying all I have to do is kind of find those moments of humanity. And as he said in one of the chunks of the interview, I know how to do the CGI. The CGI is not the part I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is making sure that I tell those stories accurately.
Do we know if there's any big names that are going to be in it?
I think it's still so early in the process. And when we did that interview with James, he was in New Zealand. He's in New Zealand at what they call Weta, which is where they do all the special effects motion capture. So he's still finishing up Avatar 3. So I think he will probably want to get through all of that. And then he'll probably begin the process.
I'm fascinated by this one, Jake.
It's, I got to be honest. Really I know we haven't seen an Avatar. Avatar movies are great, and they are technological marvels. But I think I'm ready to see what he could do with this.
You may not know the answer to this. I'm just so curious about the book itself. These people who survived both incidents, both Nagasaki and Hiroshima, did they survive for long after?
There was one.
Or did the radiation?
It's a case-by-case thing. There, in some cases, yes, radiation very much affected them. But there was one survivor who I believe is the only recognized survivor of both bombings by the country of Japan. And it's kind of become a face for the impact of nuclear war on the world. And James Cameron, he passed away in, I want to say, 2008, 2009.
Wow, so he lived
for a very long time. Into his 90s.
Wow.
James Cameron met him, was by his bedside basically a week before he passed.
Wow.
And James told him, back then, I'm going to tell this story on the big screen. Amazing. So for him, it's not just this book coming out and I want to adapt this book. This is a story he's been wanting to tell for a very long time.
And he's going to do a great job.
I think so.
I can't wait. Jake, fascinating
Thank
stuff,
you guys.
man. Thank
Appreciate
you so much.